This is Worldview Wellness Health Matters podcast, episode number 9. I'm Ty.
And I'm Micah.
And we have taken quite the hiatus.
Oh, it's only 4 months.
We have taken the biggest break from our podcast, but we are back.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be talking about...
We are going to be talking about God things and not man things.
God things versus man things.
And how that should be a theme in our lives.
Amen.
Yeah. A really important one.
In the world and not of it.
Yeah. In the Bible, there is a passage, and off the top of my head, I can't quote where exactly it is, but there's a passage in the Bible that talks about the instructions that God's given us in His Word, which is that we should be in the world, but not of it. And so I think that, people have a loose understanding of that in general, just from, Christian culture, but also I think that it's really important to kind of, get into the weeds a little bit and have a more nuanced discussion of what does that mean. And that's something that God's given us in His wisdom to protect us. And it's up to us to live that out. And it can be really hard. There's so much to that. So that's what we're talking about today.
It's a hard fence. It's a hard fence to be on.
Yeah.
On one side you have the world, on the other side you have God's ways. They are not compatible with each other, but we must live in this world. And so the older I get and the more I learn about what that really looks like, what that really means, the more I realize I don't know anything. But I do know that God's word is designed to guide us in every area of our life. Not only sleep, but waking, how we're to function throughout the day,
right?
How we are to honor our bodies, our temple, what we are to think on that will keep us healthy, what we are to stay away from that could hurt us physically, emotionally, spiritually, etc.
Yeah.
Very detailed guidelines on how to stay healthy and how to live a very, very fruitful, productive, joyful, I don't want to say happy, because I don't like that. When people say, all I want is for them to be happy, I just want to be happy. Happiness is dependent upon a circumstance, a moment, but joy comes from a deep well, a place that abides in all of us from a deep, deep place.
Yeah. Paul even tells us in the New Testament to take joy in our trials.
Yeah. And when you're abiding in that deep place, it's possible.
Yeah.
It is possible to take joy in our trials, no matter what those trials are, whether it's cancer, heart disease, dementia, failing health, or emotional stress, family stress.
We wouldn't know anything about that over the last 4 months.
Nothing at all. Work stress, any of those things can really play hard on your physicality. But I love that God has given us a way. He's given us a way to manage, to maneuver. And when He says that He takes our yoke and our burden and makes it light and easy, that is the truth.
Yeah.
That is the truth.
If we let Him.
That's right. So let's talk about God things versus man things. And I'm going to kind of let you move into that for us.
Okay. Well, I think I'd like to start that by saying that the first saying that I really heard of that came from my old boss, Dr. Ben at Veritas. And, he was, one of his things that I kind of commandeered from him was he would tell people all the time, eat God food, not man food.
Right.
And that's absolutely wonderful advice. The United States for a long time was the worst place to be when it came to diet. We now have taken a very close second place to Australia. They actually have the worst food, from, what you get at the grocery store kind of a standpoint, I think we still have a little bit of a leg up there over Australia because we still have access to good food. Mm-hmm. It may be more expensive and it may not be as convenient to get as what you can just go to your local grocery store and get, but we still have access to that.
Right.
At least a lot of people do. But I like to expand upon that about that concept and say it's not just about your food; it's about everything. So it's about God things, not man things.
Right, right.
So, of course, we already talked about Dr. Ben and how that's kind of the first time that I had heard that, and how it kind of resonated with me. And working at his clinic for 4 years, it's definitely something that I did every day in, day out. Not only myself personally, but also, of course, helping my patients when I work there, and it works really, really good.
Well, and for those of you who don't know who Micah is talking about, he's talking about Dr. Ben Edwards, and he is the founder of Veritas Medical in Lubbock, Texas, and he is a very well-known integrative functional doctor and speaker. And he was Micah's really first dive into a fully integrative functional practice.
Yeah, it was that was my transition out of conventional medicine, and a step in my career that I do not regret.
Absolutely. And I
In any
actually
way.
do have an interview with Dr. Ben that is on our YouTube station, so you guys ought to check that out.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
very informative about how we link ourselves with Veritas Medical, how we are like-minded, and basically what that looks like. And we do talk about this a little bit, God things versus man things,
Right.
in that interview. But go ahead.
Well, so the whole God food, not man food thing kind of got it started, and then I read a book by Weston Price. And that book, for those of you who are not familiar with Weston Price, he was a dentist that was born in the 1800s, and he was a very prominent dentist. And when the American Dental Association was founded in the early 1900s, he was actually their chief researcher. And in that role, he kind of started becoming aware of the fact that people's dentition, they were having more cavities. They were having more alignment and orthodontia issues. They were having just all kinds of generalized issues in teeth. And this was also at the same time that people were starting to notice that people's health was changing. And of course, this is in the early 1900s. At some point in time, Weston Price became aware that that he was not just looking at a dental issue. Of course, he was looking at a more widespread health issue, and that there were still populations in the world at that time. We're talking 1920s and 1930s that were still living their ancestral lifestyles. So there were Indian tribes, especially up in the Arctic Circle. There were the Aborigines down in Australia. There were still traditional people groups that were living ancestral lifestyles in places like Ireland and remote valleys in Switzerland and tribes in Africa, blah, blah, blah. He ended up studying, I think it was 14 different people groups. Mm-hmm. So, you could say tribes or whatever, but these were people of all shapes and colors and sizes, and he went all over the world to study them, because one of the things that, the reasons behind his decision to go and do that was because those people did not have the same types of dental and medical issues that the rest of the people that were living more modern lifestyles had. So he, this was think about this. I think it was in the 1930s that he actually did these travels. Maybe the late 1920s, but in any event, think about the technology of, the travel technology that was available back then. It was not like a quick, easy jet flight over to Australia from the United States. So, this took several years of his life, and it was an effort that was well worth it, because now we have this wonderful book. The book is called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. It was written in the 1930s, so it's getting close to be a 100-year-old book. And I would make a really good argument that it's probably one of the best examples of, lays out what we should be eating from an ancestral, standpoint. One of the things I talk to my patients and clients about all the time is, look, we have all this modern science that tells us what we should eat. We've got the old food pyramid, and we've got all this other kind of stuff. And then you look at the the people that follow those recommendations and how they end up, and they have health issues.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
So then you have these people who Weston Price studied, 100 years ago, who knew nothing about the scientific, what had been researched about nutrition. Certainly didn't have any modern guidelines or anything like that. And these people were entirely healthy.
They were thriving.
They did not have health issues at all. These are people who did not own a toothbrush and had perfect teeth. Less than 5% of the people that he studied in any of those people groups had cavities. So, they had good alignment to their teeth. They had no access to an orthodontist, who could put braces on their teeth and straighten them up. But they all pretty much, for the most part, had perfectly straight teeth.
What amazes me is when we talk about days gone by, the old days, and we think that we're so progressive and so modern, and we are no better off now. We are so much worse off now than we were 60 years ago, 70 years ago, 100 years ago, physically, emotionally.
Yeah, certainly from a health standpoint.
There's a lot of different rabbit trails that we could go down, and we won't. But if you want to talk about mental health, we were not in this boat.
That's a whole new episode.
Yes. And so, we thinking that we're so progressive and modern hasn't done us any favors, and thinking that times gone by that they were so simple and didn't really have a good idea of what they were that is a lie.
Well, that was a great setup. So let's actually talk about that.
Okay.
What is more likely to lead to good health outcomes? Modern science, which this is a whole nother podcast as well.
I know.
But when you take into account the corruption and the financial interest and kind of how the scientific establishment has kind of been crafted into the hands of those who stand to make or lose money, or thousands, hundreds and thousands of generations of people who just did things. And so they had their trials, trial and error basically over thousands of generations. What's more likely to lead to a good health outcome? People that understood what to do because of thousands of generations of trial and error, or 100 years of modern science.
Okay, but I can see that,
and the corruption that comes along with that.
But that also depends on a mindset, which is why you named our business Worldview Wellness, because the information and the truth that you seek is going to be in line with the way that you think about the world, the way that you think about yourself, how connected you are spiritually to God, how connected you are to your community. So
we have to be in the world, but not of it. And it's our, if we think the way that the world thinks, then we're missing the boat on that whole principle.
We have to really, really stand back and do honest inventory. And that's really difficult in the world that we live in now, because we have so much information coming from the right, the left, the front, the back. Many people don't know who to trust, what to lean into.
Right.
The Word of God is the best first place to start.
Amen.
And to allow the Lord to renew our minds. But then we also have to lean on that God has always known better, and He's always known best. And
it's amazing how that works.
And when we start looking at it that way, and start leaning into the more simplistic truths, because these are very simplistic truths in a way.
Yeah, the understanding of how to apply these truths is where you get lost in the nuance.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, I'll give you the cheat sheet answer to the question I posed before. I mean, the answer is, well, we have the evidence. I mean, we live in this modern time with these, or postmodern, or however you want to think about that, with these guidelines and science-based, evidence, and, it's all rigorous, and they use all these fancy buzzwords to talk about how awesome their research is, and at the end of the day, everybody's sick.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just open your eyes. All you have to do is open your eyes and look around you and look at all of the illness and the and the death and the all of the chaos that is our health. And we look at the fact that the United States spends the most money on healthcare, and we get literally outside of Australia the worst outcome. And that's because science has been corrupted, and it's not about science. We've got all we need. We have, we have this book. I mean, if I was going to recommend anybody read a book for their health, this would probably be number one: Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. It's a 100-year-old book, and it basically, I'm going to cut to the chase here. It basically talks about how these people who lived completely traditional lifestyles, got no food from outside of their community, raised their own animals, raised their own produce, made their own bread, made their own, had their own dairy cows and butter, and made their own cheese. And, so these things were not commercially processed. They were unprocessed, like in the case of bread, it was minimally processed, but it was hand processed and hand ground and made and all that. And so, these people were healthy. They did not need medicine. They did not need a doctor. I mean, think about that for a second. Really the goal. In fact, one of the things that kind of made me happy to work for Dr. Ben was when we first met him. He told me that his business model was to put himself out of business.
Yeah.
And he's not the first doctor that has said that. That should be the goal of every doctor out there, would be to put themselves out of business. Because if you're truly instructing your patients or your clients in the setting of us as a consultant business, if you're truly instructing them on these principles, then you should make it so that they don't need to see you.
Right.
They eat God food, not man food. But then let's take this a step further. You know what? Before we do that, I just want to make sure that I emphasize that in this book, how awesome this book is, and the fact that there's pictures in there that you can see of some of these people. I think it's an important note to say that he didn't just go to these places and study these people. He also was aware that that research might be downplayed, for lack of a better term, at some point. And so not only did he study these people from these people groups, but he also studied the people from those people groups that also went into the modern world and started eating the same foods that the people in the modern world ate. And then they started having problems
and the
as well.
Disastrous health effects.
So it was completely 100% obvious that it was the modern diet. And think about that. That was the modern diet 100 years ago. That was causing that. And it's gotten infinitely worse now. So with all that being said, I do think that I would be doing a disservice to Weston Price if I didn't mention the basic revelation of the book, which is that we need fat. And we need lots of fat. And the modern war on fat and the recommendation since about 1955 in Ansel Keys of the low-fat diet has been completely opposite of what we as human beings, as a species need for health and for survival, And so if you want to be healthy, you have to start to learn about, okay, what are the fats that we need? What are the difference between good fats and bad fats? And so it's not always, everybody thinks I'm just the keto guy. And I do think that the ketogenic diet is a fantastic diet for lots of people, for lots of different health reasons.
That's certainly not the only
But
dietary recommendation that we give.
At the end of the day, for somebody that's completely healthy, that doesn't really have any health issues, they don't need to be on a ketogenic diet all the time.
Right.
It would be a good idea to cycle through the ketogenic diet, at least once a year, just to kind of, make sure that you're remaining metabolically flexible. I do think that that's important.
One thing that I love about the way that you approach dietary plans with each one of our clients is that Each one is different.
Yeah.
Depends on genetics, depends on gut function, hormones, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So it's not always just keto down the line.
Right.
And
It is a lot of the time, just
Right.
because we live in the modern world and most people have metabolic issues, and that's what ketogenic diet fixes.
Well, and so we test, assess, address, and never guess, to
Right.
steal a phrase from Dr. Nasha Winters. You know, no plan is ever the same for our clients because everyone is so different. So we really try to optimize their specific individual terrain. But one thing I love about the way that you approach the eating plan is that you are not the keto Nazi.
I knew you were going to say that.
And
some of our clients probably don't feel that way.
Well, so look, so there's several points I want to make here. Is we've had lots of clients who, when we say keto, their understanding of keto is more that it's Atkins, and Atkins is not keto, and keto is not Atkins. And so when we start talking about high fat, good fat, start thinking about rich, sumptuous eating, because that is what the ketogenic diet is. It's rich, sumptuous eating. Our clients, sometimes you can see them cringe. Literally, they get this look on their face like, oh, fat, fat. But what I want to say is everybody who does the keto diet loses weight, and their body then begins to regulate itself. We've had people gain weight on the ketogenic diet because their body gets what it needs, and so it regulates itself.
Yeah.
But your whole goal is to get, and I love this, the very first time you started heading in this direction, I got really excited because as we grow in this business, my understanding grows. When you're learning, I'm learning. When I'm learning, you're learning. And is that it's not about keto forever. It's about being metabolically flexible and moving to a more ancestral way of eating, flexible eating in the seasons. Right. If we can get our clients to that metabolic flexibility, they can then eat like their ancestors ate.
Once everything is kind of, once you have through hard work and dedication and a nuanced understanding, once you have gained that metabolic flexibility, it's not about just staying in keto all the time. It's about, a true seasonal approach to things. I mean, that was part of, another thing comes out of the Bible. To everything there's a season.
Right, yeah.
Turn, turn, turn.
That's right. That's right.
and so, maybe we shouldn't be eating oranges in the middle of winter. Maybe that's not a good idea. Maybe that's not how God made the world. Maybe we shouldn't be drinking, lemonade every day.
Yeah.
Maybe we shouldn't do those things, even though, you can make lemonade with organic, natural ingredients and non-GMO sugar and lemons and all of that. If it's February, you think back about, only 100 years ago, what would your availability of purchasing lemons been 100 years ago in
or growing
February?
Lemons, right.
None. You wouldn't.
Right.
It would not be an issue or wouldn't be a thing. So, you have to think about, just because something is convenient and you have access to them because we've got all this technology and global supply chains and all this kind of thing, maybe just because we can doesn't mean we should.
Well, and we've been so removed from our original cultural or tribal ways.
Yeah.
Living off the land, eating the way that our ancestors would eat in the areas that we live.
Right. Well, and we've been conditioned to believe that the food that's in the store is good for us, and it's it's fine. They wouldn't sell it if it wasn't okay, right?
From the moment it was harvested, whether it's meat, whether it's an animal, whether it's animal meat, or whether it's vegetation or anything. If people could see it from beginning to end when it ends up at the grocery store, I think it would really wake a lot of people up.
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, what I tell my clients and old patients was that if it comes in a box or a package or it's obviously been processed. And if it's on the shelf at a store, then that means it probably has a reasonable shelf life. And those are processed man foods. They're not God foods. God foods essentially have one ingredient. It would have been what your great-great-grandparents would have been familiar with. If you are, looking at a box or a package and you're trying to look at ingredients and there's words in there that a third grader can't pronounce, then it's probably not a God food.
Right.
God foods really have one ingredient, and those ingredients are things like broccoli, beef,
Yeah.
But then I think that kind of leads us to a more nuanced understanding of that, because we live in the age of genetically modified organisms and commercial, corporate agriculture. And so I think that to kind of get this into a little bit of a more nuanced understanding about God food and not man food, one of the things that I ask my clients all the time is a cow God food or man food?
Right.
And so, of course, everybody's first impression is, oh, God made cows, that cow's God food. And so then I have to put a rule on that. And the rule is, a God food only remains a God food if man hasn't messed with it. Mm-hmm. And so, let's talk about some of the ways that commercial corporate agriculture works. Of course, most people are familiar with genetically modified organisms. There's of course, there's no consensus in the science, but I would tell you, as a man of science, a man of medicine, right now, stay away from genetically modified organisms.
Yeah.
I think that they're linked to cancer. I think that they're linked to, all kinds of health issues. I may not be right about that, but I would rather err on the side of caution and know that, the truth about science and man's understanding of the world is that we know so little.
Yeah.
But we're so arrogant and we're so full of hubris that we think that we can tinker with nature and come out on top, and that will never work.
Right.
So when we genetically modify things, what we're doing is we're making things convenient for a few to make profit, and that's really it. The lie in that corporate agriculture realm is that these companies like Bayer and Monsanto and Cargill and that list goes on a little bit longer than that. But what these farmers are being told, I've had farmers as patients, many in my clinical experience, and what these guys are being told are, well, that's how. That's the only way we can clothe the world. That's the only way we can feed the world, is to do all of this stuff. And that's what they believe to a significant degree. But that's only true in the way that these corporations have taken over if you think back 100 years ago, 80% of people that lived in America were farmers.
You just hit the nail on the head. To hear someone say, that's the only way we can. That's the only way we can.
Yeah.
That is control.
Well, it's propaganda.
Control. Yeah.
It's just plain and simple propaganda. It is to convince the people who are basically making you money at their expense, by the way, because farmers nowadays are, a lot of them are being put out of business because of all of the, technology that's coming out in that area. But, let's go back and get on topic. So a cow that you're going to buy in the grocery store, it is almost 100% going to come from a feedlot. Yeah. Almost 100%. There are some grocery stores that do sell 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef, but those cows don't come from feedlots. The cows that come from feedlots are basically raised. If you've never driven past a feedlot, the first thing you notice is the just overwhelming smell of manure and ammonia from all of the waste products that those animals are putting out every day.
It is a concentration camp.
It literally, right? It's a concentration camp. These cows are housed in very small, confined areas with hundreds and thousands of other cows. A lot of times, if you look at them, they're covered in excrement, because they're so close to each other that when they defecate, they're standing right next to another cow, and so they're literally walking around covered in excrement. They're vaccinated heavily.
Most of them are very,
They're
very sick
they're
because of their
given
environment.
right, and that's why they're vaccinated so heavily. They're also given steroids regularly they're given hormones. They're fed antibiotics in the food.
And because of the close quarters, they are eating each other's snot and
Oh
mucus
yeah,
and getting all of
it's
their
a
bodily fluids and
it's a
waste
train
in
wreck.
the food. Yeah,
It's a train wreck
it's bad.
ultimately.
It's bad.
The antibiotics in the food. The food is a lot of times mostly genetically modified grains. So we got soy, corn, wheat, and the cheapest versions of those things, which keep the cost down for the cattle farmers, are all genetically modified. So we all know that old adage, "You are what you eat." But I also take it a step further and say, "You are what you ate." And so if you're eating a cow that is eating GMOs, you're eating those GMOs too.
Yeah.
Because they have been incorporated into that cow's, physical body. And then, so, yeah, all that basically to say, I would, something I've been saying for probably 5 years now. If we were to take the healthiest cow on any given feedlot, commercial corporate feedlot, if we were going to take the healthiest cow there, go back 200 years to an old West cattle rancher or whatever, and say, hey, look, this is what we're going to eat tonight. That cattle rancher would punch you in the face and say, we don't eat unhealthy animals on this farm.
Yeah.
Because none of the animals on these feedlots are healthy.
Right.
So, at the end of the day, as far as your meat is concerned, that's, an example of, a cow as not a god food. So, now ranch raised, open, pasture grazed, 100% grass fed, grass finished beef, like what they do with Holy Cow beef here in Lubbock, or what's that ranch or farm out in Georgia?
White oak pasture.
White oak pastures, yes.
Why is it important that cattle is grass finished and not grain finished?
Because that's what God intended for cows to eat.
So when they're eating grains, what are they getting?
Well, most of the time when they eat grains, it's going to be genetically modified grains. But even if they are not eating genetically modified grains, the cow's digestive system does not process those grains in the same way. A cow is a ruminant animal. A ruminant animal has multiple stomachs and is, specifically designed by God to process certain foods and to process those foods in a certain way. And what cows are designed to eat are grasses.
Right.
That's it. That's all that they need. And when they eat the right food, especially if those grasses are really healthy, robust grasses from tended soils and all that, then a grass-fed, grass-finished cow's nutrient profile when we go to eat that animal is going to be infinitely higher. It's going to be much higher in omega-3s, much less omega-6s. Mm-hmm. It's gonna, the nutrient profile of that animal is going to be completely different than a feedlot raised animal.
Right.
And on top of that, you're not eating GMOs. You're not getting antibiotics or steroids or growth hormones or anything like that, because that animal has just been allowed to to grow at its God given pace and do what an animal is supposed to do. And if you take that same animal on that farm and take it 200 years back, then you and that rancher can have a good dinner.
Well, let's talk about how grains are usually processed. They're processed with pesticides and things like that might have glyphosate in them.
Right. So now we're getting into more of the plant agriculture side of things. And so, of course, we've already kind of hit on this a little bit. A lot of the, main foods that we eat in our country, that's a complex topic that we don't really have the time to get into completely. But, suffice it to say that our government subsidizes a lot of those foods.
Absolutely.
And the subsidies from the government are what make those foods more profitable for the farmers and for the companies that employ the farmers, since that's mostly how that works now. And there's a ton of foods that are genetically modified.
Yeah.
So the big ones that you eat probably the most, if you're a non-discriminating grocery store shopper, are genetically modified. So we're talking about corn, we're talking about wheat, we're talking about soy. Go to the store and look at your mayonnaise. Look on the ingredients list, and what you'll probably find is that your favorite mayonnaise, the very first ingredient, is soy oil.
And it heavily dysregulates your hormones.
Absolutely. It's an endocrine disruptor. It's a hormone disruptor. So genetically modified organisms. Another thing that people don't know about, beets. Beets are genetically modified, and most of the sugar that we consume in this country come from beets. So the sugar that we eat is genetically modified. That list is a long list of genetically modified organisms, but that's one of the big things in the commercial, in the plant agriculture business. Along with the genetically modified piece is all the chemicals that they use. So we have completely abandoned the idea in commercial agriculture of tending to the soil.
Right.
And it used to be that farmers, that was their goal, was to create healthy, good soil, because if they had healthy, good soil, they could grow what they wanted to.
Yeah.
And having healthy, good soil meant having cover crops and rotating crops and having a cycle.
It takes a lot of work.
It does. It takes a lot of work.
Yep.
We have kind of, in the last 100 years gone from having a healthy understanding of how all of that works, which is how nature works, and working with nature to provide the best crop, to what we call the, conventional monocrop, where, any given farmer on any given land just grows cotton. That's big around here in Lubbock.
Yep.
Or just grows wheat, or just grows soy, and these are areas of land that just year after year after year after year are just continually depleted of, microorganisms in the soil, funguses in the soil, nutrition, minerals, vitamins that are supposed to be in the soil, because in a perfect world, on a farm, the soil should be living. It's a living thing. It's a micro environment. And the modern, in fact, I kind of think it's ironic that, all these big companies and all that, they want to push climate change and all this environmental stuff. And it's like, yeah, but what you do is destroying the environment.
Yeah.
The modern farming techniques basically turn the soil into a lifeless substrate.
Yep.
And then we put genetically modified seeds in the ground. And then we try to spray chemicals and fertilizers and all that kind of stuff in order to make up for the lack of life in the soil. And obviously, with these genetically modified crops, you can actually have a crop, and you can make a profit. But what's the cost of that? And that's our health. I mean, ultimately. So. We could talk about glyphosate also, because, one of the first utilities of genetically modified organisms was to actually create a what they call Roundup ready crop. Roundup is the chemical that Monsanto kind of came up with, and they started using that in the 70s. Glyphosate kills weeds, and if you have a seed that's been genetically modified to not be killed by glyphosate, then at least on the surface, everything looks good. So in the 1970s, they started using that, and initially, they would actually hire people to put glyphosate backpacks on, and then go around by hand and spot spray the weeds. It didn't really cause that many problems with that particular application of it, because it was done only early in the season when the crops were low and they were in competition with the weeds, and then they didn't really need to use it all that much later on. Well, then in 2006, they actually approved the desiccant use of glyphosate, and that's when we started seeing all of the. I mean, think about it in your own life. Did you hear about celiac disease and people that had gluten intolerance and all these autoimmune diseases before 2006? And they existed, but it was not it was not a very common thing. And now we have autoimmune disease coming out the yin yang, and we've got, I don't know what the exact statistic is, but so many people have celiac disease now, and even more than that have non-celiac gluten sensitivity.
Well,
So
and a lot of our
it's,
cancering clients are so chock full of glyphosate, it's unbelievable.
it's destroying our immune system. And so what they say, or what Monsanto and Bayer have said, is that it doesn't interfere with human physiology, but what they neglected to say is that it does interfere with our microbiome.
Mm-hmm.
And it does. There's all kinds of evidence out there that it creates leaky guts, and that leaky gut is then what leads to autoimmune disease. So glyphosate's another one. Atrazine is one that's very commonly applied too, especially like if you live near a park where they spray chemicals, or a golf course is another big one. You're probably exposed to atrazine. Atrazine is a chemical that can completely mess with your endocrine and hormone system. Atrazine is a chemical that there's been scientific studies where they've exposed frogs to atrazine, and all of the male frogs actually switched sexes into females.
Oh my goodness.
And some of those male frogs that turned into females were actually fertile. So, I mean, they did a complete 180-degree switch. It feminized all of these frogs, and some of those frogs who were male that were now female were actually able to produce viable eggs. That's what atrazine does, and that is what you're being hosed with if you live on a golf course.
Goodness gracious.
We could also talk about, EMF, right? EMF, or electromagnetic frequencies. So think about your cell phone. Think about Wi-Fi. These are not things
Bluetooth.
that exist in nature. Now, there are electromagnetic frequencies in nature. They come from the sun. There's space radiation. There are naturally radioactive substances that are on the planet just naturally. Our universe is an electromagnetic universe. So but the man-made version of EMF, think smart meters, think your Wi-Fi router at home, think your cell phone, all of wireless mouses and keyboards, all of those things are things that are detrimental to your health. So, it's an important thing if you're trying to follow this God things, not man things principle, to minimize the use of that as much as possible. We want to, like for instance, there are no wireless mouse and keyboards in this house.
Nope, not one.
We do not use Wi-Fi internet.
Unless we have company.
Unless we have company,
Yeah.
or unless we have an extenuating circumstance. We do have a Wi-Fi router, and we have the ability to turn it on. But I have wired this house, at least for the our most common electronics that we use, so that we can keep our Wi-Fi turned off. Now, that's not to say that we're not getting hit from our neighbors on all sides of us from their Wi-Fi routers, but we've minimized our own personal exposure because we don't run the Wi-Fi in our house. We've also put a smart meter cover on the smart meter that was put on the back of our house. Like I said, we don't use any wireless devices if we can avoid it. So having an appreciation of wireless electromagnetic frequencies is really, really important.
Well, and I'm just going to say that for my own personal experience, I feel less brain inflamed, and I feel less foggy since you've done that.
Yeah.
I absolutely can tell a difference.
Yeah, me too.
I really can. I'm very, very sensitive about body symptoms, and I absolutely.
You're not sensitive. You're particular.
I am particular, but I absolutely do feel so much less foggy since you've done that. It has made a difference for me.
Well, so that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Then we can also talk about another thing that's come up since World War II, which is the whole industry of plastics. And the chemicals that are used in plastics. I mean, it's horrible. The plastics industry was genius when it decided to do the whole we're going to get rid of BPA because this is such a horrible chemical, and we're going to run this big PR campaign about how we get rid of the BPA. At the same time, they're literally leaving hundreds, if not thousands, of different chemicals that are doing the exact same thing as BPA in the plastic.
Yeah.
And
we're seeing newborn infants born with plastic in their blood.
Yeah, yeah.
That's terrifying.
Well, and think about this. Plastics, what plastics are made out of is a waste product from oil and gas, from the petroleum industry. So they've basically, and this is something that is not unique to that particular industry, but this is kind of how the modern world works. If you have somebody with enough, with a company that produces something, oil and gas or whatever, and there's waste products that come from that, then if you're a savvy business person, you can pay some scientists to figure out a use for whatever waste you're doing, and then you can actually sell your waste and make additional profit on that. That is what plastic is, ladies and gentlemen. It is a waste product that has tons of chemicals in it that will dysregulate your thyroid and your endocrine system. Your HPA axis, or your hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, will dysregulate your sex hormones. So all you men out there running around with low testosterone, and all of you women out there that are having hormonal issues that you're trying to get bioidentical hormone replacement therapy for, do not do it. There's no and this is going to be a controversial statement, but it's what I believe. There's no good use for hormones.
I agree with that. You used to be the hormone king.
I did. I prescribed hormones to hundreds or thousands of people, and I was really good at it. I could make people feel better. But, that's kind of been on my evolution of learning and understanding about how medicine and the human body works.
Well, listen, so
it was basically the natural equivalent of what the pharmaceutical industries do. They're treating symptoms, not problems.
When you put me on hormones, I felt great for the first 2, 3, 4 months.
Yeah.
And then started having serious dysregulation, started having a lot of issues. I'm now 52. I have been in menopause for a decade.
Yeah.
Just about. I have 0 hot flashes. I have minimal side effects, if any, from being in menopause. I don't take any hormones at all.
Yeah.
At all. And for the most part, I feel really, really, really good.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's see, what were we talking about? Plastics.
Well, and I mean, this all sounds like a horror show.
Well,
it does. It just sounds like a huge horror show. So let's talk about how to get away from these things. Okay, so we now know that plastic is everywhere, and that our clothes are literally being made out of plastic. So what do? We buy linen. We buy cotton. We stay away from the false fabrics.
Right. Well,
so let's talk about what to do.
Before we go into that kind of wrap-up segment, there's one other area that I want people to be aware of, and that is household products.
Oh, yes. Let's talk about
Cleaning products,
that's good. Yeah.
Shampoos, soaps, lotions. These are typically products that if you're just buying the what's conventionally available at the grocery store, the things that most people are buying, those things are absolutely toxic and highly detrimental to your health. You have to, think outside of the box and, go back to old school using, vinegars and ammonias and, there's even a device that one of our clients had us take a look at. I think I was looking at it last week, which was a water machine that actually has, metal plates that can run voltages through the water that can make alkaline water or acidic water. Mm-hmm. And when I first started looking at it, I was thinking, in my head, I didn't tell you this, Ty, but I was thinking, why in the heck would you want to make acidic water? These people are crazy. Until I watched, their video and read some documentation on, on all of the uses for their product. And that was what they were doing. They were making acidic water so that people could clean with water. Perfectly good use for that.
That's another thing I love about you is once you see the information, you're always very open-minded. It's never just cut and dried for you.
Yeah.
You're very open-minded, and if you can see the proof and see the data behind it, then you will expand your thinking.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't about, hey, drink this acid water.
Right.
Of course, whenever I went into it, I was thinking about, okay, this is going to be stuff that people consume, so let's look and see if it's good or not. And so when I saw the acid water feature on there, I was like, ugh.
Well,
but it was good. It was great.
Right.
It was made specifically for cleaning, and so you don't have to have these very hazardous, carcinogenic chemicals in order to clean your house and make it clean. You can actually do it just with water. Now that device was like a $500-$600. No, it was
$5,000. It was one of the most expensive water systems we've ever seen.
And it did not have what I would consider to be optimal filtration.
Right,
so you would have to use that in conjunction with good water filtration.
Well, so talking about household items, there are companies out there for you ladies who are scratching your head wondering how to go about it. Vinegar is a wonderful, wonderful cleaning solution that you can use.
Yeah.
Thieves has wonderful organic household cleaning products. And when it comes to makeup, let's talk about that. Phthalates. I mean, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of chemicals that are harmful are right next to your brain.
Right.
So, you want to be mindful of the kind of makeups that you use, the kind of lotions you put on your face. Perfume is a no-go situation. All perfumes are carcinogenic.
So what's the answer? Well, one answer is, what I think everybody should do. You've got to educate yourself.
Yeah.
You've got to have an independent mindset. And that kind of leads us back to why we named the business Worldview Wellness.
Right.
You've got to have that understanding that if you are not doing your own research and you're just hoping that somebody else is out there, keeping you safe, you have been deceived. If you're not doing it yourself investing in your own education as far as that's concerned, and that could be talking with us at Worldview Wellness, getting a consult with us. That could be going and having a conversation with Dr. Ben at Veritas Medical. That could be, you just deciding, hey, look, I'm going to educate myself because at the end of the day, I need to know this stuff. And you absolutely do if you want to protect yourself against this toxic soup that we are all living in. And trust me, I don't care who you are. You're living in a toxic soup.
Yeah.
We all are.
There are answers, but you absolutely... The very first step is to take responsibility. You must take responsibility if you want to be free and if you want to govern your own life sovereignly.
Right.
As a free person, the way God created us to be free, right. You must take responsibility. And taking responsibility takes work. When we're talking about food, we're talking about these train wrecks, these, this toxic, like you said, soupy mess that we live in, but there are good answers. Foods. There are, organic fruits and vegetables, grass-fed, grass-finished beef. There are deliverable meat and veggie sources out there.
So let's talk about that just briefly before we end the show. Let's talk about beef.
Okay.
Grass-fed, grass-finished, free-range, pastured beef.
Yes.
That's what should go into your body.
Yes.
If it's not that, it shouldn't go into your body.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, just something that popped into my head here. There was a study that was done here pretty recently. They looked at a package of beef, like at a regular store, like just Walmart or Costco or whatever, and it was just your typical beef. There was DNA evidence in that one package of beef that beef came from actually over 80 different cows, just in 1 pound of beef. Because it was, all these cows are slaughtered and just kind of all mixed together, and
reminds me of McDonald's.
Wasn't even one cow.
Chicken nuggets.
You were literally in like one hamburger going to eat over 80 different cows.
And there's no telling what each individual cow has had in the way of immunizations and medicines.
Right. And so so ultimately, beef, grass-fed, grass-finished, free-range pastured beef. That's what you should be putting in your body. As far as chicken, same thing. Free range, organic, non-GMO feed. If they're going, because chickens do need to be fed things, and so you want to make sure that they're not fed GMOs. No antibiotics, no growth hormone, that kind of thing. As far as your poultry is concerned, as far as pigs or pork. the big thing with pork is, what do you feed a pig? There's all kinds of green labeled pork products out there. Talk about vegetarian fed and all that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? GMOs are vegetarian.
Yep.
So they're, if that's what it says, then then you're probably going to be eating GMOs, even if you're getting that good non-cured, or uncured bacon. You're still eating GMOs. So there's actually a company out there. This is the only company I can list off the top of my head, called Beelers. Beelers.
They have the best pork products I've ever had.
So they have non-GMO vegetarian fed pigs.
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that they're humanely kept, so they're allowed to free range and do the things that pigs are supposed to do. And they eat a good diet. So as far as pork's concerned, that would be the way to go. You can get Beeler's products at natural grocers, and you can order off of their website. As far as fish, there's no such thing as a healthy farmed fish.
It's true.
Only fish that goes in your body should be wild caught fish. And guess what? If you like sushi and you go out and you eat sushi all the time, guess what? That's all farmed fish for the most part. So you got to be really careful about that. As far as your produce is concerned, vegetables and fruits, they should be organic or better. Or organic doesn't necessarily mean totally safe.
Right.
But it is still better than the non-organic produce that you're going to find. So if you have an opportunity to go to a farmer's market and meet your farmer, so that you can actually talk to your farmer about the fruits and vegetables that you're eating, and they can tell you that, oh yeah, we don't use chemicals, we do this, because it's natural and yada yada, then that's the best. Knowing your farmer, knowing your rancher is going to ensure that you are the most educated about the foods that you eat. And if you can do that, do it.
I love that you just said that, because last September we did speak at the Beef Initiative in Georgia at White Oak Pastures with Texas Slim, and Adam Curry was there, and Will Harris was the owner of White Oak Pastures.
Yeah.
An amazing, incredible rancher.
I know. I want to live there.
I know. It's in the way, and he took us on a tour of his ranch, and he showed us his ranch land, and I was really, really impressed with the way that he has tended to the soil, with the way he has tended to really all of his livestock. But what I would ask anyone who listens to this to consider: care about where your meat comes from, care about how the animals are treated, care about the environment that your produce was grown in, and more to your point, get out there, get to a farmer's market. This is really big in the Beef Initiative. Shake your rancher's hand, look them in the eye, know where you're getting your meat.
It's about you doing what it takes for you to live the most meaningful, open, aware existence that you have, right?
Yes.
And in order to do that, you have to be aware of the problems that we have in the society that we live in and the times that we live in, and sticking your head in the sand is never a good option.
Right.
So if you're aware of those things, and you can, like we were talking about at the very beginning of our podcast, take joy in this trial of trying to figure all this out.
Yeah.
And understand that any improvement that you do is going to pay. It's going to pay off in your health. It's going to pay off in how functional you are in your life. The whole thing about people falling apart as they get older. I refuse to engage in that.
It doesn't have to be that way.
It does not have to be that way. The people that Weston Price studied specifically in the Lochenstall Valley in Switzerland, there were farmers in their 80s that were carrying 300 pounds of produce.
Yeah.
Or their own product that they were growing. They were carrying 300 pounds of it back to the barns.
Yeah.
Out of the fields. He said 100-pound sack in each hand, and they were also carrying a 100-pound sack in their teeth.
It's crazy.
So I mean, think about that. An 80-year-old man carrying 100 pounds in his teeth. Number one, you have to have pretty dang good teeth for that.
Yeah.
At 80. You also have to have some pretty dang strong neck muscles.
Yeah.
Most people that are 40 now probably couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Without slipping a disc or something. But I mean, when you live life in the strategy of God things and not man things, aging into your having an active, healthy senior experience is possible.
Yeah.
You don't have to be this old, decrepit person in a nursing home.
Well, and so basically everything that we've been talking about today is something that we talk about over and over and over with our
Yeah.
clients, with our, with really with anybody. But this is what we do. And I want to go into this just very, very briefly. We teach, we educate, we do direct to consumer labs, and I want to kind of get into the supplements that you recommend because those are clean too. We're talking about making responsible choices,
Right.
In your life.
The same problems with all of the man things that we discussed in this podcast are also true, unfortunately, in the supplement world.
Right.
Where, it makes me cringe to learn that people have been taking, like, for instance, the Spring Valley Walmart brand of supplements, because I have no faith that those are good for you.
Yeah.
And my limited research I've done into that has just proven that that's absolutely true. They're made in subpar, easy manufacturing ways. There's all kinds of, additives and fillers and things in those supplements that I would not give to my, cat, much less another human being. So, taking supplements is very good. I mean, you almost need to in today's day and age, unless you're really, really, really on top of things. But the quality of those supplements are important, and you get what you pay for. That doesn't mean that every good supplement has to be astronomically expensive. They're not. Some are, but a lot aren't.
Yeah.
And getting good quality supplements is important. So we have access, through our service to a good supplement company that has good quality supplements that I've personally gone in and vetted everything that I recommend.
And I tell people this all the time because I don't want anybody to think it's gimmicky. We never suggest and stick with just one line of supplements ever. There are hundreds that you use that are the gold standard of supplements, non-GMO.
There's lots of good companies
vegan,
out there. There's
not
lots
filled
of good
with
companies
garbage.
out there.
Yeah.
There's lots of good supplements out there, so it's, and I'm still finding them. I mean, there's every now and then there's a case that I get that people are like, have a new problem, and I get to go and do a little bit of research and figure out a different supplement. And every time I find something like that, I just add it to my own little personal pharmacopoeia.
Right. So this is what we do. We teach, we educate, we try to help people gain their own footing in their own responsible, sovereign, self-dedicated walk, towards health and towards God things, not man things. And so we basically give really, really good recommendations as far as eating, as far as, lifestyle recommendations, supplements, etc., all clean.
Living an independent life.
Living an independent life. That's what we want to do. So whether someone this is what I use, this is an analogy I use for all of our clients, whether someone just wants to pop the hood of their trunk and make sure all the levels are good in their engine and just kind of see where they're at.
Wouldn't that be the hood?
The hood of their trunk?
The hood of the car. The trunk's where you put your luggage.
Oh, I'm saying it backwards. Maybe I shouldn't use a car analogy, being that I'm not a car person. Yeah, so we pop the hood of the engine, and then we kind of look to see what the levels are, how everything is going. But if somebody has a deeper, more complex issue, we literally take the engine out of the vehicle, take it apart, we do a rebuild. Yeah. And so, that's kind of what we do, and we teach people where to look, how to look for themselves, what to start moving towards, and it's a really good feeling to know when you are sovereignly directing your own life before the Lord and engaging in the clean, healthy things that He's asked us to engage in to promote long life, clear thinking, good community.
Not a whole lot of that going around these days.
At all.
But in any event, at the end of the day, do God things.
Yeah.
Eat God food. Don't do man things. Don't eat man food.
That's right.
Get outside, exercise, focus your thoughts on being grateful and thankful and being appreciative for the things that you do have, instead of wasting time in anxiousness and worried about all of the things that you can't control. I mean, it's about facilitating that balance in your life.
That's right.
And about being independent so that you are aware, so that you're not reliant on other people. Because the more, or I should say, the less independent you are, that means the more dependent you are.
That's right.
And I hate to break it to you guys, but nobody's looking out for you except for you.
That's right.
So, with that being said, we did it. We did another podcast.
Yeah, we broke the barrier. Back on it.
Yeah. So, bless you guys. We'll be back hopefully next week for a new installment of Worldview Wellness Health Matters.